Welcome everybody to another interview. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Mark Lefebvre, fiction author, especially of horror novels and short stories, but also non-fiction author. For example, Killing It on Kobo, which I greatly appreciated. All right, so he's a former director of self-publishing and author relations for Rakuten Kobo and the former president of the Canadian Booksellers Association. And now he's a director of business development at Draft2 Digital. So, good. Today we're going to talk about your latest book for indie authors, which is Wide for the Win. So, Mark, thank you for being here.
Eugene, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good. All right. So, I got your book here in my Kindle. It's really, it's a must, I think.
I got a physical copy here to kill spiders with.
See? That's great. I'd like to start with the with the question you already asked, you know, in your book, like, why not going wide?
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not?
yeah, that's true. I mean, well, and that is the thing that's important. So I do explore in the book. I actually talk about why people may want to not go wide, because it's simple and easy to only have to ever think about one retailer, the world's biggest retailer. Mm-hmm. And it is a lot of work. And I know I've scared a few people off of wide, because I'm not going to tell you that there's a magic bullet that, you know, if you publish your books wide, everything will just magically appear for you. That's not going to happen. That was never going to happen. It is a lot of work, and it's and I want authors to be prepared. I don't want to, you know, trick them into thinking that, oh, it's just going to be an easy path. Well, no, it's not. I mean, the fact that you wrote a book, for example, is evidence that you already have a lot of that determination of what it takes to actually sit down and get it done. Because most people say they're going to write a book. Most people say that. You talk to the average person on the street and they say, oh yeah, I always wanted to write a book. Very, very few people actually ever do. So the fact that you've done that tells me that you have the determination and the commitment and the passion, the patience, the practice, the persistence, 3 of those elements of the 7 P's of publishing success, right? Therefore, if you have those elements, you do have what it takes to be successful wide, provided you're willing to commit yourself to wide and not just push a button and call yourself a wide author because you've published wide, but actually digging in and giving as much attention to the other retailers as you give to the big river.
Yeah, that's true, because usually we set it and forget it, you know, and that's a big mistake, because I mean, like, organic sales do exist, but they're not like, I mean, 100% guaranteed. So you always have to work on it and keep doing it. Like,
well, think about organic growth. If I can use an analogy, you put a seed in soil. The factors are there. You have the seed, you have the soil. It needs water. It needs sunlight. Those are the additional factors that help it to grow.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people do without even thinking is they spend a lot of time, attention, and money on Amazon advertising or focusing on that. And they don't think that they're doing it. They think Amazon's doing all the work for them, but the reality is they're investing their own time, money, and effort into it. And then when they put the book wide and they don't advertise wide, or they aren't inclusive, well, it's not working everywhere else. Well, you don't expect Amazon to sell your book for you. Why do you expect the other retailers to do all the work for you too? Right? So it's kind of like it's a two-way street. It's like you planted the seed. Now you actually have to water. You have to apply some water. You have to apply some sunlight, and maybe even a little bit of tender, loving care. Maybe talk to it every once in a while. You never know.
Right. So talking about analogies, so putting all the eggs into one basket, right? So
yeah,
you talked about the concept of quantum eggs.
Yeah.
So what is it?
I'm so glad you asked about that, because I was having a lot of fun with it, because everyone talks about that eggs in basket, and you drop the basket, and you can use the example of Blockbuster. Well, what if I had an exclusive deal to have my DVDs on the shelves at Blockbuster? Well, there's only one in the world right now in Oregon in the US.
I didn't
That's
know
not
there's
going to
still
be.
one. Okay,
There
that's
is
good.
still one, and I really want to visit it because it's kind of like this legendary place. But
Right.
when I think about that's very, very restrictive because you're only thinking about Amazon versus 4 other retailers. You're not thinking about the bigger world. You're not thinking about the tens of thousands of bookstores or more around the world to make your book available. And you're only thinking about the ebook when you're having that discussion. And you're really limiting yourself by having that argument. Quantum eggs, it goes back to the concept of, and I learned this in a business masterclass with Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush, where we spent a whole day talking about IP and intellectual property and thinking, well, the book is just one side effect of the greater resource that comes from our brilliant storyteller imaginations
Yeah.
that we've created and we've confined it to. Now, I used to say, when I was initially at Kobo and talking about, the greatness of the ebook is that an ebook is more than just 300 pages bound between 2 pieces of cloth, which is what publishing told us a book was. An ebook can be short, it can be long, it doesn't matter. Digital blew that up in an amazing way. And I think about writers need to think, okay, I had an idea and it has come out as a book. That's one of hundreds of possible ways that idea could be exploited, right? And it's not just ebook, trade paperback, hardcover, large print, audiobook. And then when you get into audiobook, there's multiple types of audiobook. There's single narrator, there's multicast, there's different versions of audio as well. There's audiobooks, but then there's using podcasts for serialization chapter by chapter. And then something that I did, for example, and I want authors to think wide, and I use all capital letters when I say that, is not just think about, oh, am I going to publish it to Amazon exclusively or publish it wide? And think, there are several of my books that I have licensed to a publisher because I'll be honest with you, the majority, and you're experienced more globally than a lot of authors in North America, you understand even more so than people in Canada and the US understand, I bet, that in Europe, for example, print books are still king by far. And even in North America, most people who read are still reading print books. 70 to 80% of readers are still reading print books. We're still at the very early stages of the digital revolution. There's millions of more customers who have never read an ebook. So when you're thinking about that, so I've signed a license, I licensed my rights to a publisher because as great as I am, as long as I've worked in the book industry since 1992, I still can't get print distribution without an investment of tens of thousands of dollars for warehousing, etc., the way that a publisher can. And I've got my publisher that's gotten my books into bookstore chains, got my books into Walmart, got my books into Costco, wholesaler, which I could never do. As much as I know, all the things I've learned about the book industry, I still can't do it. And I like to think, well, I kind of, I've been a book buyer, I've been playing all these different roles, and I still can't figure out a proper way of doing it without having to invest a significant amount of money. But a publisher can do that for me. So there are times where there are books of mine that are they're souvenirs, they're physical products that people want, especially my haunted location books, like the ghost story books. I rarely sell any. Well, that's because the publisher doesn't know how to sell ebooks, but I rarely sell any ebooks. As a matter of fact, I probably in the time we're doing this interview, I probably have sold more ebooks while we're talking than my publisher will sell in an entire year of one of my ebooks. That's because they're focused on print. And so that's one of the things I want authors to think about is there's no one thing. There can be multiple channels. So I have licensed work to a publisher. I've taken some of the other work that didn't end up getting published there, and I've published it myself from the same research, from the same concept, from the same core idea. And then I've even used, there's a company based out of South Africa that is global called VoiceMap. And I've licensed audio walking tours, ghost walking tours, based on the exact same research. I may have licensed the print and ebook rights to a publisher. I may have taken extrapolations from that weren't used in the book and done it myself, self-published. and I've also licensed it in a completely different format that's not even a book. And
Yeah.
that's just three of probably dozens of things I haven't even properly explored. And I want authors to think that way. I think it's really important for them.
Yeah, because the thing is that, sometimes we usually tend to see things like black and white, so either traditionally published or self-published. But yeah, that's actually much more. And in order to be truly wide and reach even more people, we got to be really open-minded. And yeah, also, for example, in the book, there is an article by, a post by Mark Dawson, who did kind of the same. So
Yeah.
he signed up with the traditional publisher just for the rights of his, the hardcover and paperback
Yeah,
for
because
his
Welbeck.
books.
Yeah, and Welbeck has
Yeah,
gotten his book into airport bookstores, and I mean, let's be honest. Like Mark Dawson is a seven-figure author. We all in the indie author space, we worship at the feet of Mark Dawson because he is a godlike creature who has just done tremendous. However, as powerful and smart and rich and intelligent as Mark Dawson is, he still signed a deal with a traditional publisher
mm.
because they could get his book into places he couldn't, as cool and awesome as he is. And he's smart enough to recognize that, but he also signed in a brilliant deal with no advance and a 50-50 split. So the
Yeah.
publisher is invested in actually selling copies in order to make their money back. And Mark is earning a way more than he would ever earn. Like a traditional deal would normally get him like 8 to 10% if he was lucky.
Yeah.
Right.
Building up on this, so what kind of contract should we expect in general from an honest publisher?
Well, in a standard traditional deal, you usually get an advance. So there's usually money up front. Now, advances, when I started in the industry, advances were, they were in the six figures. And then they got down to the five and the low five. And now, I mean, especially a beginning author, you'd be lucky to get a four-figure advance. A
Handshake.
low, a low four-figure advance. And that is the money that you get upon signing the deal with a publisher. Now, here's the funny thing about advances, especially because publishing can take 1 or 2 years from signing. You get 1/3 upon signing the contract, you get the second third upon delivery of the manuscript, and you get the third upon publication. So if it's let's say it's a $1,000 advance, which is actually not bad for a first-time author, you
Yeah.
get $333, and then another 333, then another 33, and I'll give you an example. So with Dundurn, one of my publishers, they sell the books for $25 Canadian, and I'm making 8%, so I get $2 every time they sell a book. I still haven't gotten my royalty statement. So we were in early May of 2021 when we're recording this, and I still haven't even seen a royalty statement for my 2020 sales, which comes in once a year. Now the fiscal year ended a couple months ago, and then they take forever to run the reports.
Yeah.
They mail me a check for what I earned with these statements that say, this is how many books you sold, this is how many books were returned, this was what your advance was, and then they subtract it out of the advance. So for example, I don't start making money on royalties until after they sell 500 copies of the book. Now, interestingly enough, most books in Canada don't even sell 100 copies. So most books never earn out their advance. Now in the States, that may be 5,000. Most books sell under 5,000 copies because it's a much larger market.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing. So when you're dealing with a publisher, you're often licensing the book while it stays in print for the life of that copyright. And then there may be clauses that say after, if it stops selling X amount, and there are, like a good friend of mine, Kevin J. Anderson, I know there's been contracts where if they sell less than 100 books in a year, he has the option to take back the rights because he can sell way more himself, even in print. And so there's a lot of clauses. I really strongly advise authors check out Christine Catherine Rush, the Business Rush. You can just Google her, and she provides this information for free on her blog. Now, she does make it handy, and she does have a really great book on agents, contracts, and clauses. And it was the first time that I read an earlier edition of that book that I'd signed with Dundurn. there were a couple clauses I couldn't sign because I was like, wow, I already have a deal with another publisher for my first novel. And so I couldn't give them right of first refusal. I had to get them to limit it to right of first refusal for my next nonfiction paranormal book. So it was very limited, which kind of opened me up to not be locked in. And when I read Chris's earlier version of the book before signing the second contract, I found 12 clauses that I did not want to sign. I wanted to adjust because a publisher will send you a boilerplate, and the boilerplate is obviously going to be in their best interest, because you got to
Yeah.
remember a contract's a negotiation, and you're allowed to ask for changes in a negotiation. And it's easy for them to just boilerplate and send it out. Now they have a special Mark Lefebvre boilerplate that they use with me because they know there's. But what happened is I asked for 12 things, and they gave me 10 of them. The two they did not give me is they did not give me the ebook rights. I wanted to keep them because I knew I could do a better job than them. They're too terrified to give that up. And they kept audiobook rights, even though they have never published an audiobook at all.
Interesting.
Which is, and I thought, well, you know what? I would still have to pay for the audiobook and all that other stuff. So what I did do, though, is I used the same research to create a different kind of audio property that I've made money on. And I've done talks that I've gotten paid for. So again, all of this quantum egg theory is coming into play, even though I've given them the rights, because I will give up those rights for the privilege of knowing that they're going to stock my book easily available to any bookstore in the world that wants them. Costco has had them. Walmart has had them. So, and again, I now call that vanity publishing. I could walk into a bookstore and see my book on a shelf. Well, that's vanity publishing because it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make money off of it.
That's true. Good. So you mentioned about audiobooks. So what is going on with the audiobooks market? I mean, it's expanding, right? So what are the possibilities for us?
Well, you know what? The audiobook market is just exploding, and it's in the triple-digit growth, very similar to what I saw when in the early days when I was working at Kobo, and we were seeing triple-digit growth. But it's expanded more. I think in some ways it's probably not expanded to the rate that it would have had the pandemic not happened, because one of the side effects of the pandemic is a lot more people were working from home.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're not commuting, and commuting was when they were listening to a lot of books. So some people have changed that. They've changed the patterns. Like, so for example, I'm now listening to audiobooks while I'm washing the dishes. I'm doing that while I'm taking the dogs for a walk.
Same, yeah.
Right. I've changed my behavior a little bit. And maybe my audiobook listening is 2 minutes while I go from upstairs to go downstairs to put on some toast and maybe have my second breakfast of the day or whatever it is. And I'm only listening for 2 or 3 minutes as opposed to 20 minutes or 40 minutes. However, the audiobook market is expanding. And I think podcasts are helping, because podcasts like, Serial, and there's been a lot of great content where people are consuming in a different fashion. Even platforms like Clubhouse that have emerged since the pandemic. Where people are getting used to listening in a different way. And even my partner Liz, she refused to listen to audio books. She would say that, well, that's not reading. And we would get into these arguments because she would say, well, you didn't read the book, you listened to it. I'm like, okay, it went into my head and I imagined things based on the words that went into my head. Does it matter, how it got into my head?
Yeah.
Do you think Braille's not reading because you're not seeing words on a page, you're feeling them? So again, the whole thing of story is somebody creates something and you consume that, and then you reinterpret that in your head in your own way. Yeah, it's in someone else's voice, so that may change it for you. But she's now an avid audiobook listener, whereas
converted.
Wasn't. But I think with audiobooks, they're very expensive still. But based on the technology that I've experimented with in the last couple of years, and you're smiling, you probably heard the recording Joanna Penn and I.
With Joanna Penn, that's my
so Joe and I had that AI voice conversation, which kind of sounds like us, but without the inflection and humor. Right? You can't hear the smile in our voices when we talk to each other. But that technology is going to probably within the next year or two, is going to get to such a point that more people are going to be able to afford it.
Now, it was already really impressive, the results of the recording. It is like, wow. So I couldn't imagine, because we yeah, in general, we tend to think, oh, this is gonna happen, you know, in 10 years or stuff like that. No, it's already happening now. You
Yeah.
can, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I released when I put out my nonfiction book, The 7 Ps of Publishing Success. It's only about 12,000 words, so it's a relatively short book.
Mm,
Because again, it doesn't have to be 300 pages bound between two pieces of cloth.
yeah.
I had the audio that I recorded myself, which took a long time. You know, it's only an hour and 45 minutes or something like that.
Mm,
And it took me a long time to read it. Probably took me 8 hours of work or 10 hours
mm.
of work just to get that done. So I charged $6.99 for that. Um, but then I used an AI voice, Brian, British male, because he sounded a lot more sophisticated,
Yeah.
and I charged 99 cents for that one because yeah, you can kind of tell it's not human if you really attend to it, but if
Mm,
all you care about is the content, you can get that for $1
yeah.
and consume it. And I did that several years ago, and I plan on doing that with more of my books. I just haven't had time because I do want to. I think with my nonfiction, because I am a speaker, and you know, I talk to authors all the time, and I have a podcast. I think people would prefer. Well, actually, hey, I'd rather hear it in Joanna Penn's voice. And when that comes, I'll take advantage of the technology. You want to hear it in Yoda's voice? Do you want to hear it in Samuel L. Jackson's voice? Do you want to hear it in Joanna Penn's voice? As an author, I would fully pay and license, you know, to give a share to the people who own those voices. And if you want to listen to it in a British female voice,
Yeah.
cool, go
Why
for it.
not?
I'm going to
Yeah.
listen to it in your awesome. You have an Italian accent.
Yeah.
I want to listen to the very sophisticated sounding Italian voice. Like that would be really awesome because it sounds a lot more worldly than my boring Canadian accent.
Not at all. But yeah, yeah, the possibilities are like infinite. It's amazing. And another thing that is fascinating about audiobooks is that you can actually consume them even more quickly. Like because you have the option, you know, to change the speed,
Yeah, yeah,
and that way you can even consume more audiobooks.
which
Because
is
for
good for
reading,
authors, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, right. Because if we read a book, more or less, it's just the speed is always the same in our mind when we try to read. But with audio, so
Well, I
yeah.
did that recently. So this book, Hitler's Monsters, which is an academic text from 2017 about like paranormal stuff in the Third Reich in World War II.
Wow.
Now this bad boy, what, 600 pages or so, and it's really small print. It was about 18 hours in audio. I got to a point because I was researching it for a fiction book I was writing, but I'm probably going to use some nonfiction stuff too, right? You remember that IP? You can get
Mm,
one idea in, and it can go into a novel. It can also go into nonfiction research. There was one point where I was listening to it at 2.5 times speed
right.
because it was a really slow narrator and it was relatively dry academic material. I could consume it a lot faster, which meant I could, you know, it didn't take me 18 hours. I think I listened to the book ultimately in maybe 8, maybe
Wow.
9 hours.
Hmm.
Because I started off at regular speed, and then I went to 1.5. Then I ended up going. Eventually, I got to a certain point where I got to 2, and then 2.5. Because once you get used to the narrator,
Mm,
all it is consumption. It's kind of like when you ride a bike. The first time you get on your bike, you're like pretty slow because you're worried you're going to fall, and
mm,
then once you get more confident, you speed up because you already know what you're doing. Same thing with, you know, skiing and stuff like that. You can go on a much steeper slope once you get better at it.
right.
And I
Yeah.
love that because, as you said, you can listen to a book faster. Therefore, you can consume more books, and if you consume more books, that's really good for the publishing industry. It's really good for writers.
Yeah. I think now, especially we can learn a lot from the independent music market.
Yeah.
Because now they're trying to fight for, you know, like Spotify, and try to get more from this kind of subscription model that is now trendy, you know. And I think, yeah, that there's a lot. It's gonna improve even for us a lot in the future. Once, yeah, if we can negotiate a bit more from this subscription model, it'd be
Well,
better.
And that's the thing is, so as
Yeah.
subscription models become more prevalent, because we get used to binge listening and watching and stuff like that, that may change the way that authors make money from the traditional a la carte ebook sales that they've gotten
Right.
used to. Still young, and so that's where learning, making sure that you're spreading your revenue out and getting income from as many different sources as possible. So if, for example, one platform stops selling a la carte and is all subscription based, and you're getting pennies where you used to get dollars, where are you going to make up that income? Well, quantum eggs, quantum baskets, all of those
Right.
things where you've got multiple revenue streams. It was the cost per checkout library model that kind of took me by surprise
Mm.
when I first, and it actually came through Findaway Voices with audiobooks. On these books now, these are short stories, because if I'm paying a narrator, $250 an hour for a
Mm.
10-hour book, it's going to cost me $2,500. That's
Yeah.
expensive. It's, and to be quite honest, all of the audiobooks that I've done that are full length, I haven't yet earned my money back on the sales.
Mm.
But all of my short fiction, which may be an hour, cost me $250. Or it might have been an hour and a half or 2 hours, right? So my costs were reduced. I was getting cost per checkout sales through the library markets. And again, it might have only been, instead of a few dollars per sale, I was maybe making 75 cents or $1.15 or something like that. But every time somebody checked it out from the library, I got it again. And I got it again. And when I had a book club pick up my book, because they loved the narrator, I didn't know who I was, but they loved the narrator, Eric Brian Moore. I had a bunch of
Mm.
romance readers pick up my Twilight Zone style fiction. And one of the reviews I saw on Audible was, "Oh, never heard of this Mark Leslie guy. We just kind of came here because we like Eric's voice, but hey, he's not bad." Um, and I found that those cost per checkouts really added up and
Mm.
helped me earn back my investment. And then the other brilliant thing, again, thinking of quantum baskets, I've paid for the audio. I own all the rights to the short story. And then I have this short story that I've paid for, and I have this short story that I've paid for, and I've made all these micropayments on those sales. Well, now I
Mm.
have 10, 20 short stories that I can collect and make a unique audiobook product
A
of all the
bundle.
different short stories
Mm.
that will then sell on a place like Audible, because it's 10 hours.
Yeah, makes
Because it
sense.
has to be worth, $15 a month, right? At that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Talking about that, another question was one tip about pricing when going wide, because uh, usually, we just, okay, we decide, okay, we go wide, we publish, oh, my book is going to be in every single market, everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter the price. I just set the price in dollars and that's it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, that's a really limited way of looking at it. Now, often because a lot of the retailers that you're using or distributors may originate in the U.S., so you set a U.S. price and you go, well, I don't need to do anything. The world deals in U.S. commerce.
Mm.
Yeah, the world has their own unique things, and you know this better than I do, of course. But there are multiple currencies, and there are currency patterns that people get used to. For example, when a customer sees 367 on a price, let's say it's 299 American, they see 367 Canadian, which is the automatic conversion. They're rounding up to $4 in their head. So the author's leaving 20 cents on the table that could be in their pocket. And that adds up. Again, all of those trickles of money add up. Or in Europe, and a lot throughout Europe, for example, .99 or .49 are just as relevant, just like in GBP,
Yeah.
because the dollar is much stronger in pounds as well as in euros. Now, I'm not as familiar with some of the other currencies. I know in Rand for India, you want to go as low as humanly possible, because
Uh,
otherwise it's
right.
just going to be pirated. Makes it more
Sweet.
attractive. And I'm not as familiar with some of the currencies like Hong Kong dollars and even in Japan
Yeah,
or
yeah,
any.
yen.
So I'm not as familiar with what the price points work there, but I, at least for English language books, say you make sure you manually tweak and optimize your US dollar, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, euros, and pounds. So you've got those six main currencies. Um, and Draft to Digital is an example of even if you don't use them to publish, There's a built-in auto price optimizer for you. And what I often do is I'll go in, do my book there first, then I'll take a screenshot of what those prices are. I'll
So you
set and
remember?
log the prices in. Then I'll go to Amazon because I do publish there directly, and I'll plug those in directly on Amazon. Then I'll go to Kobo and plug those in directly on Kobo. Then I'll go to another distributor if I'm using a distributor like StreetLib or Publish Drive to get into some of the other markets in Europe and Asia.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
lock in the exact. Well, you're required to have the same prices, but then I always usually start with Draft to Digital because I find that it's a really handy tool.
This brings me to the next question, like publishing direct or through aggregators. Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because you already mentioned something, but yeah.
It's not a cut and dry answer. It's something that every author has to explore with multiple factors, because some of the factors are time and energy, the ability to get promotions, where sometimes you're limited by promotions if you're not direct. Sometimes it's the margin, right? That 10% difference. So if you're direct, it's 70%. And if you go through a distribution platform, it's 10%. Sometimes it's security. Technically, you're not allowed, like if you have a virtual assistant, technically, if you give your virtual assistant your login to Amazon, you're violating their terms and conditions, and they can shut you down at any moment, which is terrifying for most authors to be shut down at Amazon, which is one of the reasons why they go wide, out of fear. So there's all of these factors. So it's more than just 10% margin or whatever. So what I typically do is I'll go direct to Amazon where I can. I'll go direct to Kobo. I created Kobo Writing Life, some kind of partial of the platform. I typically then use Draft to Digital for most of the other platforms, and then I'll supplement it with Smashwords and Publish Drive and StreetLib to get the broadest reach possible. But again, that's still 5-6 logins I have to manage, which is unwieldy. Some authors just want to have a single login. And I'll give you another example. Obviously, I'm biased towards Draft to Digital, but with payment splitting, I've used Draft to Digital for publishing everywhere, because then I don't have to worry about taking the money and then paying my co-collaborators. Draft to Digital pays them directly. They take all the money from all the retailers, they split it up, and I never have to see it. And they even send them a tax receipt. I'm done. Like I love that. And that is way worth losing the 10% margin.
No, it's true. It's true.
Probably 30 hours of heartache and stress and labor, like just going and doing that work. So yeah, okay, I can't run a direct promo, I can't run an Amazon ad on it, or I can't get a direct Kobo promo, but that's okay. It saved me so much time and energy. So again, there's no one answer, and with each book project, depending on where you believe the market is, you may choose a different thing, and you can. That's the beautiful thing about being an independent author, is you have a complete spirit, you have complete control, and you get to decide where and how things happen.
Cool. So we know a lot about Amazon, but I'd like to explore with you a bit more about the other major platforms that are available for us. Apple Books, Google Play, Kobo, because actually they're pretty interesting, right? And I think also maybe you can, we'll see if you can confirm it to me, even the audiences might be different. So the people who used to read books through Google Play Books are not exactly the same as the ones who buy books through Apple Books,
right,
or something like that. So it's interesting to also get to know your audience, because it's not the same that the one that is on Amazon. So
well, yeah, oh no, for sure. And people can be as loyal to their ebook reader as people might be to the brand of cigarettes that their father smoked, right? There's no, it's kind of like in the beer industry in Canada, there's the major lagers like Canadian and Labatt Blue and the Coors and Bud. They all taste exactly the same. The only difference is there's a different label, and people identify with that label, which is a superficial thing, a confirmation bias that we all have.
That makes the difference.
The same thing is true. So for example, when you talk about an ebook and you like an ebook, and I go, oh, can I get it on my Kobo? And if I can't get it on my Kobo,
Or
I stopped looking because unless you're, Stephen King or some author that I'm going to go chase around the world, if it's not on the platform I already shop on, you have lost me. Which is why universal book links and being inclusive is important. But some of the differences at the other retailers that you mentioned, apart from the pride that people take saying I'm an Apple person and everything's Apple, right? Like just
everything.
gung ho, right? Well, obviously, if your book's not on Apple, that you've lost that person. But Apple, Kobo, and Nook specifically are three retailers that do a lot of manual curation and merchandising,
Mhm.
very much like what an independent or even chain bookstore would do, where they have the people decide what books are going to go in the front window and what books are going to go in the main aisles. And that's what you see when you browse the store, those main aisles and categories. Amazon is a lot more algorithmic based, 99% algorithmic based, and then
Yeah.
every once in a while they may feature something. Google as well, even though they have the aisles, it's really heavily algorithm based. Now, the other thing you got to remember about Nook, well, Nook, you don't have to worry about international pricing. You have US and that's it. Ever since they backed out of Canada and the UK and stuff like that. But with Google, with Apple, and with Kobo, you're looking at 190 countries that your book's available in. More so than they are with Amazon. Even Smashwords has a
Mhm.
much better global reach on their retail platform, because you got to remember Smashwords is also a retail platform, not just a distributor, right? And authors forget that Smashwords has its own customers that have been buying on Smashwords since they started reading ebooks, and they
Yeah.
read however they read, and they buy them from Smashwords because you kind of start that way. I started, my for me, for example, I've moved trying to translate it from starting off with Apple and iTunes and buying all my music through there, and then slowly migrating over to Google as our home has become a Google home.
In
And
Google
it's like,
Home.
yeah, so it's like, wow, I purchased all my stuff here, but that's a weird thing. Like I've had people like, well, I've got all my ebooks on Kindle. Well, I don't know if I can, Kobo's on sale for Mother's Day weekend here in Canada. Should I buy one?
Um,
The nice thing about Kobo and Nook and Apple and even Google, well, Google doesn't have its own reader, but they all use EPUB. And for an indie authored book where there
yeah.
is no DRM locking it in, you could buy the ebook on Kobo and then download it and read it on your Nook,
Everywhere.
and vice versa, right? Or open it up on the Apple app or a Google
Yeah.
app. And that's the beautiful thing about Wide. So you can you've purchased it, you can just move it across library. Those are some of the things that I think are important for authors to understand.
And I think also in terms of pricing, again, those kind of readers out of Amazon, they're used to different prices,
Yeah,
I think, because Amazon they try to push down as low as possible, usually,
right.
like a super bargain. But in other markets, I noticed that still people are they're willing to pay even more. For example, talking about bundles, right?
Yeah,
It's actually more convenient to sell bundles somewhere else out of Amazon because you can get more royalties, right? That there's no cap, right?
yeah, you're right. Amazon has the cap at 9.99. So a lot of authors, once you get beyond 3 books in a bundle, once you're getting to 5 and 6 and 8 and 12, your bundle price, even at $20 or 25 or whatever it is still probably 30% cheaper than buying all books independently. So you're saving the consumer money. But at Nook and Google and Apple and Kobo, you're still making your full 70% or 60% if you're going through distributors. You're still making a huge margin on those, where you only make 35% on Amazon. What I tell authors to do is don't worry about Amazon. You already have like the books independently. You may have smaller box sets there. Don't put it on Amazon. You'll really lose money if you sell that box set there, because you're not going to make nearly the money you would make selling it on the other platforms. And
Yeah.
Kobo specifically, I was in a clubhouse session yesterday with Tara, who's running the Kobo Writing Life platform over at Kobo, and she was saying that Kobo readers love their box sets. So there's always a lot of box set promos, and I always, if I see a promo in the Kobo Writing Life dashboard for box sets, I've only got one or two decent ones that are big enough and expensive enough to, because again, you got to remember, it's maybe a 30% off promo and it's a box set, and 30% off of $4.99 is, I can't do the math in my head, but that's going to be a small
Mm-hmm.
number. But 30% off of $19.99
Mm-hmm.
is a
Yeah.
big deal. It's a bigger number. Therefore, the customer is getting a much better value, and they're more likely to buy. At least I've had more success with those big bundles on places like Kobo.
Cool. Okay, so we talked about this kind of different platforms, the options that we have, but when it comes to marketing, uh, what can we do? Because the strategy is totally different, right, for wide
Right.
authors. So what do you suggest, for example? Like, what could it be our mindset? Okay, so my book now is available everywhere. How should I set this thing up? The core of the marketing strategy.
Well, I think the big challenge often is because often authors will start with Amazon and they'll learn everything about Amazon. Okay, think about what that was. You focused on a single retailer and you worked really hard and you went from zero to whatever you got to because you put in the time and energy.
Yeah.
You can't expect to go wide and be successful on all the platforms immediately. You may have to pick and choose particular retailers and say, okay, I'm going to spend some time trying to figure out and understand Kobo. I'm going to spend some time trying to understand Apple. The first thing you should do as a consumer is go browse the store. Don't just look at your stuff on Amazon. Go browse and see what the experience is for a customer. What are the top selling books on that platform? In your category, are they different than what you've been seeing on Amazon US, for example? And taking a look at that, understanding what are the features that the merchandisers are doing, which gives you an idea of what their customers want, because the merchandisers are attending to customer needs, so they're putting stuff up based on those customer behaviors. So
Yeah.
you'll see flavors and patterns very unique on each of the retailers. You have opportunities with Facebook to advertise to any platform. BookBub ads, not featured deals, with BookBub ads, you can uniquely bring people to your own website. You can send them to a universal book link, or you can send them specifically. Right now, I am running targeted Facebook ads, Facebook BookBub ads to Google Play, because I'm trying to increase my traffic and my money on Google Play, which is my one of my poorest performing platforms. But Google Play has some really great tools where you can make promos like 80% off, 100% off. And I know it's algorithm based. So if I can just get a lot of action and get
Yeah.
more customers to grab some of the books in my series, maybe they'll go on to read them and enjoy others. And so I've been very specifically targeted all the right authors, or the comp authors, the comp titles on Google Play with a coupon code, just driving them to these Google landing pages. And again, I was like, oh, I'll give myself a couple months of like focusing and experimenting, just like you would do on Amazon ads.
Mm.
The authors see nothing wrong with spending hours analyzing and testing and doing A/B testing on Amazon,
Yeah.
and very rarely do the same sort of testing on other platforms. So I think taking the time to do that is important, but really, really seriously, look at it as a customer. Oh, get the free app, download the free app, check it out, browse, see what the experience is. Then you're going to start to really understand, what do you have that can probably help that platform help its customers. And that's where submitting to the promotions that are available, like directly through Kobo, directly through Nook. Apple doesn't care if you're through a distributor or if you're direct. They don't care. They just want good content.
Yeah.
And they're kind of agnostic about, like, we just want good books. We don't care if it comes from Draft Digital or Street Lib or wherever. It does, Smashwords, it doesn't matter. Or if it's direct. And they're not as competitive in terms of, no, the author has to be direct, which makes Apple a really great company to work with, because they care ultimately, like in very much in an Amazon way. Amazon really cares about the customer. They don't care about the publishers and authors. They couldn't
Mm.
give a rat's butt about the authors and publishers, but they care about the customers. And Apple really cares about the customer experience. It's a very Apple experience to have that branded, right? So if you get an Apple merchandiser interested in you and they reach out either through a distributor or directly, it's like, oh my God, Apple wants to do something with me. Yes, please. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
but there are book lovers at these companies that are actually looking at the books, which you don't necessarily get at the world's biggest bookstore.
Right. Good. Um, Again, talking about marketing, do you think that perma-free is still a thing? Is still worth it?
Yeah, the only reason why people think it's not a thing is because it's not necessarily a thing on Amazon. It used to be a trick and a tactic you would play on Amazon, and then Amazon fixed their algorithm so it couldn't be a tactic that worked anymore. But free is still a significant game changer. And it's not just like first book in series. I'll give you an example. I just interviewed somebody for my podcast, episode 190 of the Stark Reflections podcast. James Fell, who was traditionally published with his previous books, self-published this recent book. But here's the thing: free isn't just, make book one free and then they go buy books 2, 3, or 4. This is a standalone book. He released the book completely for free, one chapter a day, 366 chapters over the course of a year, and that was a year with a leap year in it. And then after he gave all of that content away for free, he had it edited and published in a book. And again, I'm going to use Amazon as an example because it's an easy one to go to. Go and look at On This Day in History, Shit Went Down. And my apologies if I swore, but that is the title of the book. Go and look at James Fell's book and you'll see that it's trending really, really high on Amazon. Now, here's the freaky thing. He's doing really well with the ebook. His print book is like triple outselling the ebook, which is rare for an indie author. Now, because it's a nonfiction book, it's one of those books where it's like, On This Day in History, 366 pages of really cool. It's like bathroom reading. You put it in the bathroom. You can sit there and if it's a longer trip, you can read 2 or 3, right? But it's like these really short, digestible. If you're commuting, you could probably open up your phone and read the ebook online. But like his print book sales are exploding, and it's killing me to see how much he's earned off this because he's already given it away for free, the entire book, and people want a print copy of it because they want to have that or they want to gift it to someone. And again, that's thinking of those quantum eggs and quantum baskets, because he also he was on Patreon and doing really, really well. Again, the content was there for free, but it was more easily digestible in a serialized format on Patreon because it gets fed in a different way. And he's moved over to Substack, where it's even more convenient to have free content and stuff behind the paywall. And it's kind of like his belief, and he said this in the interview, is people got the content for free and they go, I really like this guy, I want to give him some money.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like, yeah, the people who love you, the super fans, they want to support you no matter what, and then that's great.
So free is not just that, make a first book free and then you hook them with the free bait. The free can work in so many different ways. I mean, for example, all of the content in the book Wide for the Win, I've constantly given out free over the years. I just said, oh my God, I just should put as much of it as I can in a book, and if they want to pay $6.99 for it, they can just have it all in one place and they can highlight it and then point out my typos and all the fun things you get to do with a book.
Yeah. So talking about supporters, Patreon, right? Because I'd like to open a Patreon account for my fiction brand, and but recently I haven't been that productive because I'm very busy with other things, and
running conferences and stuff.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So what could I offer, for example, in such a case? What could I offer to my patrons?
So you're for fiction writing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a few different strategies that authors have used. Sometimes it's cut scenes, things that are not available in the book, like additional backstories, character backstories that may not fit in a conventional book, but they love. I was just watching an old thing about Star Wars and George Lucas and the first 3 films and just how insane it was. And you think about just how insane people are about the minutia of details of these characters that were on screen for half a second, and somebody's written an entire biography of them, because fans can get so passionate. So you may have a character that you can just explore and go, hey, here's character sketches. You want more about them? Or this is Marvel did this great in the comic books, the What If series. What if someone else had been bitten by a radioactive spider and not Peter Parker? Like in a fictional world, we're already imagining what if another fiction happened. So that kind of content, all of these ideas that you didn't end up putting into a book. The other thing that some authors do is they release the content to the patrons ahead of anyone else getting it. So the patrons get special treatment. There are special people who get stuff 6 months ahead or a year before anyone else gets to see it. Sometimes maybe they just get to hang out and chat with you, right? Or whatever. So thinking about all of the cool things that a super fan would want. Or sometimes they just feel good about wanting to support. I've supported indie musicians, and even though I'll probably buy their album when it comes out, but hey, if I support them on Patreon or Kickstarter or whatever, I get access to stuff early. But you know what else I get that's more important to me? I get the satisfaction of knowing that somebody whose work I value and love, I supported and I helped make that happen.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why Patreon, that's why platforms like that can really work, because you're really, let's be honest, Eugene, it really comes down to a relationship between this creator who has this brilliant IP, storyteller, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you're still a storyteller, and the consumer who wants to consume that story, wants to learn, wants to be entertained, wants to be inspired, wants to be informed. That's exactly what publishing is. We've just called it a book. And that's what you're giving with Patreon. You're giving this intimate experience between creator and consumer where they can connect together. There's an old joke from Jerry Seinfeld. He had a book called Sign Language. It was just a book of some of his like lines and jokes and stuff. And it was this really cool blurb, because I was a bookseller at the time when it came out in hardcover. And it said, "This is my book, but you can read it." and I know it's a joke and he's being silly and whatever and cheeky, but it's my book, but it's your book too. And the minute I put it out into the world, it's someone else's book. And that's why the argument of, you know, and I know this is not a book, but it was a script originally on paper that George Lucas wrote, was who shot first. You know, bar fights have started over wars have started over who shot first in the first Star Wars. Was it Han Solo? You know, that kind of thing. It's a fictional thing, and yet people are so passionate about these things. And I would love that. I worked at Chapters, which is a chain bookstore here in Canada that had the couches and the coffee shop and stuff. And I remember our CEO coming in and doing like a town hall with the staff, and staff were like frustrated because people would come in and get their coffee and get their magazines and put their feet up and it would act like they're in their own living room, you know, sit in their underwear, scratching themselves, like, you know, like what, come on, dude, like, come on, you're in public. And one of the things he reminded us of is they are so comfortable in our store that they feel it's their store. Yeah. That's what we want. We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to feel like it is their store, not our store.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thing. Now, again, it can be abused, but you know, especially if dude's sitting in his underwear.
It's a bit too much. No,
but yeah, like that's a powerful thing, right? Don't you want people to feel ownership like that?
Yeah, really. I mean, like, it's really important to build a community around your imagination. I mean, your productions, and it's good. Yeah.
And that's where Patreon can be a real win. So if you can find those connectivities that you can give them that kind of feeling of ownership and that this is yours together. Yeah, okay, I may have created this world, but now it's yours to play in.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so last question. So since you work at Draft to Digital, how's it going with the printing on demand service? And also, are there new features you guys are working on recently?
Oh, all the time. So the print program has taken a significant amount of time. Now, unfortunately, it's taken a lot longer than we planned. But the last
that's when you want to do things, you know, properly. So it's good.
And one of the reasons it hasn't come out of print beta is we're not satisfied with the level of customer support. We're not satisfied with the lack of international support. So it's pretty decent now for folks in the US and Canada. It's not good for anyone anywhere else in the world, at least for author copies. For distribution, it's the same. But if you want to get author copies, it's not good. And so we're now getting to a point with the development we've done the last several months, significantly improved the process. We're probably within, and I'm not sure when this is going live, but probably by summer of 2021, the print beta will be open, and then can continue to expand and grow to include more international author copies once we, because again, what we need to do is make sure that the customer service associated with print, which involves a partner that has to do physical manipulation of things, which is unlike things we've ever done before, because we just manage the digital file. Oh, there's a problem with Apple. Oh, great, we have contacts at Apple. We'll, like within hours we can have it solved, right? In the print world, it's a little bit different. Well, no, the warehouse is closed right now, therefore we can't get someone until the, you know, to find out what's going on. So the level of customer service has to get to a certain level where we can feel confident that we have insight, so we can actually get back. So for example, we can get back to the author and say, listen, Eugene, I'm so sorry. Here's what we know is wrong with it. We're not going to hear back from someone until tomorrow morning, you know, 9 o'clock Central Time. And then we'll let you know about it. But at least we have an answer that we can give you rather than, so I don't know,
Yeah.
right? So that's important. The other thing that I know is there, because you can get the opportunity to have the cover, the custom cover wrap made for you. So if you only have a front cover, it'll do that for you. I know we're probably going to expand our options, but first we need to have a solid, workable process for the standard trade paperback black and white interiors that we have. Once we have that rolling, I know we have plans to expand that and make it even better. Because I think what we've seen is that we thought it was going to be relatively a small number of people who would want to use it because, well, you can do it on Amazon and you've got Ingram Spark and you've got all these other options. But we recognize that some authors just wanted the convenience of going, okay, I made my ebook, push, and it's half the metadata is the same. Okay, click 5 buttons and now I have a print book, and it's everywhere. And so that's, I'm really excited about where that's going to go. I'm lucky I'm a beta user, so I've had access to stuff early on, but even in the beta program, just in the last month and a half, the turnaround and it's like night and day. It's like, oh my God, it's what I've always wanted it to be.
Wow. So
and
fast.
So I'm pretty pumped. I don't even use KDP print anymore. I just use D2D print for print distribution. Now I'm still using Ingram Spark for hardcover for now. So,
yeah,
but no, I'm pretty excited about that. And then once we finish that, we have so many other opportunities with increased promotions with our partners. I've just met with 5 different partners to try and get more different library programs. So we get promos from Apple and Kobo and Overdrive regularly, but increasing that with Vivleo. I'm sure you've heard of Vivleo, from France. They're really ramping up their promotions with Biblioteca and with some of our other partners, trying to get more, working with them to get some great curated content. And not just, and again, with Vivleo, they're also looking for other languages too, not just English, which is really good for international authors.
Right. Yeah, because there are whole new markets opening up. Because I was talking, for example, with the Street Leap founder the other day, and we were talking about China. Because also even there, you know, in the future, it's actually already happening that they're opening up to especially, you know, for English language. But yeah, these are all new markets. There's not only US. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a much bigger world, right, than North America when you think about it.
Yeah, and when you go wide, that's when you can reach them more easily. You know, that's
exactly.
That's the mindset. You know. Good. So thank you very much, Mark. Wow, really appreciate a great chat with you. Good.
Thank you, Eugene.
So
it was a lot of fun.
I wish you all the best for your projects, to you and to Draft to Digital as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugene. I appreciate it.
Cool.